Hello everyone, this is David from Automotive Press, and this week I have a 2021 Mercedes-Benz GLB 35, which is at the top of its game in terms of the compact SUV. It's a pretty impressive package. It has the AMG powertrain and AMG suspension and design themes to go with it. The GLB in general competes with the likes of Audi Q3 and maybe even the Lexus NX, and then X1, X2, or even the X3. It's a pretty exciting car to drive. It looks amazing. But as an automotive engineer, I have a different insight and perspective on these cars. So let me start right away with the three things I do like about the GLB. The first one is pretty obvious, and that is the overall design theme and the way this car evolved to this state. The GLB 35, of course, has the AMG look with the bold grille. It's got a kind of interesting profile. It's got a big, massive wheels, of course, but it's got a really interesting profile that cuts abruptly vertically here. It's got a bit of a hockey stick increase on the C-pillar here, and all of the design, this kind of muscular, hunky, solid look and feel, it's a descendant of the kind of G-Class look. And so I really like the feel of this. So if you put this right beside, let's say a BMW X1 or X2, this looks much more premium. And I received so much feedback from just the general public driving this thing around, and they come to me and say, what is this thing? It looks expensive. And with a starting price of less than 60K here in Canada, it's still a reasonably priced vehicle for something with so much performance packed into it. So the first point I really like about the GLB is the overall design, the packaging, and then the quality that goes with it. Now, one controversial point of this GLB 35 is that they are built in Mexico. In fact, GLBs are all built in either Mexico for the North American market or in China for obviously the Asian market. And so that's a bit of a controversial thing because I'm sure that most Mercedes-Benz buyers would want this to be built in Germany. But for the most part, the quality is top-notch. So I evaluate the body fit and finish by running my finger between the panels. And I'm a former automotive body engineer, so I can run my finger through and tell you how well these two panels have come together in terms of alignment. And you can tell the gap stays consistent all the way, and it's very well aligned together. And then I also look at the paint quality by comparing the paint between the panels, particularly when you compare it to the bumper section. So if you look at the paint over here, here, and here, and here, these were all painted in sort of a different ways, and manufacturers that do not have a high quality standard have a hard time matching the paint. But here, you can tell the paint is really well matched. Now in a dark blue color like this, it's hard to tell. Sometimes a lighter color is easier to tell a defect. But nevertheless, I also look at the quality of the panels here. I also look at the quality between these, and they all fit really well. I will point out, and this is one of my negative points, sometimes the door doesn't quite close properly. It needs a little more effort than I'm used to. Because the overall design and the overall feel is much more expensive than what it appears to be, it kind of fools people into thinking this is a six-figure price tag vehicle. Point number two, it is the overall performance of the way this SUV feels on the road. It has a 2-liter inline turbocharged 4-cylinder engine that is good for 302 horsepower and 295 foot-pounds of torque. Pretty immense amount of power and torque for a compact SUV, and it comes strong. So when you step on the gas, because of the turbocharged design and the way it's being calibrated, it's a pretty massive takeoff right off the bat, allowing this SUV to reach 60 miles per hour in just over 5 seconds. So the speed and acceleration is immense. It is obviously a bit noisy inside because of the way it's been tuned. Comes with low profile Continental Sport Contact 6 tires. These are summer tires, so you know that Mercedes is serious when they give you pure summer tires. These are pretty sticky tires. Continental makes a really good summer tires actually. It's well suited for this car. This isn't your comfortable Lexus RX type of SUV, far from it. It is firm, it is planted well, and it corners really well. but it is not for everyone because the ride can be firm. Of course, the engine power output is substantial improvement over the base GLB, and that comes through loud and clear when you're driving this vehicle around all kinds of conditions. I will say the handling, while it has a pretty good heft to it, and it does have a good neutral feel, it is lacking a bit of a feel. I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But the overall feel is obviously one of a performance-minded SUV, something that you couldn't get, several years ago. You just could not get this kind of performance in a compact SUV at this price range. So kudos to Mercedes for bringing this to that higher level with the AMG package, and of course it has all of the other AMG design themes across the entire car. But the engine, the suspension, and the transmission, which is a really quick shifting transmission, is all part of this package that makes this GLB 35 really fun to drive on the road. So the third thing I like about this Mercedes-Benz GLB 35 is just the amazing amount of technology that you can get on this car. It's just loaded with everything from this large infotainment system to ability to change colors. You can even see colors throughout the dash and interior. It's one thing that Mercedes does really well. Even the steering has a combination of suede, which is kind of like a microfiber material, with leather and a satin finish aluminum look feel. And to be honest, it's not super practical because it's slippery here and here, but the design wise and technology wise, it's hard to beat this combination. You can even get controls here, and these are like a semi-digital controls at your fingertip. And of course, the biggest thing is the amount of technology that's packed in here. I'm really glad that it's now a touch panel. In the old days, you have to use the touch pad, which you can still use, and but it's just so much easier this way. Has all of the latest safety features, but it also has some cool things, such as ability for this system to respond to my voice command. So I'll show you that in a second. But even under comfort, you can change all kinds of feature here with ambient lighting, and there's multiple colors you can change, which of course this is not new anymore. There's lots of cars offering this, but the whole display here is pretty cool. And it has a hand gesture mode, which means I can point to certain things like the map lights, and then if you do a certain gesture, you can have it turned on without touching things. I found that to be a bit finicky, and but the voice command is gotten better. The earlier MBUX system wasn't as good, but now I can make it work well. So for example, I can say, "Hey Mercedes,
how may I help you?
Can you lower the temperature?"
I'm reducing the temperature on the driver's side to 16 degrees.
So it just lowered the temperature on my side. It knew that it was driver speaking, not the passenger, for example. And so the ability for this to interact with me and to communicate with me is pretty outstanding. I have yet to discover all of the things I can do with this GLB 35, but there's just so much technology packed into it. So the first thing I'm not too crazy about is that despite the fact that the interior is well designed, looks amazing, and looks super expensive, it's not always practical. So this infotainment system, which is really impressive to look at, but when you use this car day in, day out, I've been driving this for about a week or so, sometimes you just really miss having big buttons. So things like a temperature control are thankfully physical buttons, so I can move these things up and down. But of course the radio controls are here, which is kind of a small. This is typical for Mercedes, and then this is for the chassis setup in terms of how you want the feel to be. So there's a dynamic and a comfort in individual setting for suspensions and steering feel and engine and transmission. So these are okay, but when you use it for a week or so, sometimes you get a little bit frustrated with having to scroll all the time for everything practically. It's definitely better than some of its competitors, and MBUX is actually one of the better systems for sure, but sometimes it's a bit overwhelming, and in a performance vehicle like this GLB 35, sometimes I just want a simple environment. Steering has amazing technology packed into it, but it's almost too busy. Now there's almost as many buttons here as there would have been normally in a dash, and you still have to take your eyes off to look at this, and not only that, it's hard to read them because it's not quite very clear painted symbols in here, and under certain light you can't read what the actual logo says, and the slippery surfaces mixed in with kind of Alcantara or suede is fantastic looking, but this part is super slippery, so as you're turning the steering you can kind of lose a bit of a grip in here. So those are some of the pet peeves I have. I think it's just a bit busy for my taste as a performance model, but of course I think more and more people are craving for these type of technology, so Mercedes is moving toward that direction. So in the case of this GLB 35, it corners flat, it rides firm, and the steering has a reasonable amount of weight, but it's numb, and so it's kind of artificial feeling, and I think Audi does a little bit better job of that. And most manufacturers struggle with this now because of the electric steering that's in almost all cars. Obviously, the Porsche Macan has the best steering feel, no question about that, even though that car is now somewhat old in design. So that's one complaint I have. The steering is a bit numb, the ride can be too stiff, and the cabin can be very noisy from the tire sound, which isn't always pleasant. So those are something I want to point out. The transmission shifts well, the brakes feel pretty solid, but if you were to ask me, is it a really fun car to drive, a fun SUV to drive? It is in straight acceleration, and also if I have a lots of winding road, smooth winding road is fun to drive, but as a daily car, it is a bit bouncy, and it's a bit noisy. So those are some complaints I have for this GLB 35. So in summary, this GLB 35 impresses in many counts. It has immense and amazing performance. It has a look and feel of a much more expensive SUV, and it has the highest level of standard equipment and technology I've seen for a long time. It makes all other competitors kind of look outdated and cheaper in comparison to this model. But it also has some quirks. The MBUX infotainment system, still not quite perfect. The ride is a bit too stiff and firm for some people, and it can be a bit noisy on the bumpy roads. So all that stuff, of course, is a compromise. Keep in mind, this is meant to be a performance SUV. I think the quality overall is really good. The body fit and finish, the interior fit and finish is good, and the paint job, as I explained earlier, is a good one. But I did notice, for example, this door and the rear door doesn't quite close as well as it could be. Sometimes I'm doing this, it doesn't quite close. So there are a few things that maybe they still need to sort out in their Mexican factory. I'm going to reiterate that you don't need to worry about the fact that it's made in Mexico versus Germany. Those things aren't a concern anymore. As a former production engineer for automotive industry, I can tell you that they have a really good standard for Mercedes, and it doesn't matter where it's made, it's going to meet a certain high level of specification, and so that shouldn't be a concern to you. But I will say there is still some difference between this model that's built in Mexico and those made in Germany by production workers who's been doing it for years. And so those are some of the things I want to point out for GLB 35. Overall, I really like the whole package and design theme and the concept of the GLB 35. Really well executed for the pricing, even though it can get somewhat pricey when you add all the equipment. But Mercedes have done a great job, and the competitors have a lot to worry about because this thing, it just looks better and performs better than most competitors. So that's it, folks. Thank you for watching. I'm signing off for now. Please stay tuned to all my upcoming videos as I continue to talk about cars, trucks, and industry as an automotive engineer. Thank you again.